Good morning, first grade. It should be Wednesday, May 20th. We are continuing to talk about making inferences or inferring. Both mean the same thing. So if you recall, a couple days ago we did a little bit of making inferences using these two pictures and the stories related to them. This was a reminder when you, I'll hold it up closer. When you make an inference, you figure out something that wasn't completely explained using information found in the text combined with your own personal experience, your prior knowledge or background knowledge. So when you infer, you make a good guess, not just a random guess, a good guess about a good guess based on what you know. So things like the weather. We all know about the weather. If it's raining out, we know that you can get wet when you go outside. Those are the kinds of inferences that we can make. So, that being said, what can you infer? So, even without the text, you can kind of make an inference just based on what's in the picture, right? So let's read what the text says. Vivian looked out the window when she woke up. It was not sunny. She was excited to wear her new boots. Okay, so we can make some inferences based on prior knowledge, based on what we know. One inference we can make is that if it's not sunny and she has an umbrella, that it's raining. Another inference we can make is that it is morning because it says she woke up. And generally, when we wake up, it's in the morning. Also, it says she was excited to wear her new boots. So we can assume that perhaps she hasn't gotten an opportunity, maybe it hasn't rained for a while since she got her boots to wear them, which is why she would be excited to be able to wear them, perhaps for the first time. So those are some more inferences that we can make based on a simple picture and text. So I'm going to add these to our collection of making inference pictures. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and read a book. But first I want to remind you about this. How do I infer? Take what I know, add to it clues from the text or the pictures, and then tell the equal sign what is probably true. Here they show that darkened in piece, the missing piece. So as we read the book, it says, I infer whatever your guess you're making from whatever the picture, clue, or in this case, that makes me think that this thing makes me think that this thing is true. Since the text says blank and I know blank, I infer blank. So as we're reading, we're going to try and use that strategy. You remember yesterday, we read the book, What Do You Do with a Tale Like This? And when we looked at the book, we saw pages that showed a part of an animal. So here's the tails. And we use our background knowledge of animals to be able to look at the different tails and say, oh, well, I know that an animal with a long tail like that and spots is a giraffe. So we could infer that that tail refers to a giraffe tail. And then when we turn the page, we find that indeed we were accurate. Our inference was correct. We can also consider this something we're going to learn later this week about predictions. I predict that the next page is going to show a giraffe and a skunk and a scorpion and a monkey and a lizard. And those are the things that we discover were true. So we inferred and with our inference made a prediction. We can justify our prediction based on the pictures that we see and what we already know from the past. All right, so here's the book we're going to read. And again, following my little snow theme here, and yesterday or the day before we talked about looking at evidence to prove or to support our inference or to prove that our prediction will be correct. This book is called The Mitten. It is adapted from a story, kind of like a legend, a story that's been told from generation to generation. So this author, Jan Brett, decided to make it into a written story and then added her own illustrations. So these pictures were drawn by her. the text was written by her. So we can infer, based on the title and based on the picture, that this book has something to do with a mitten and has to do with these animals and the mitten. We're going to look at the different animals here. This is a mouse, a bear, an owl. That's a mole. We saw that in the book yesterday, but he doesn't have the attachment on his nose. Here's a rabbit, a fox, a badger, and a hedgehog. So we could begin to make a prediction about what the animals have to do with the mitten. We could predict that the animals might fight over it or something. Well, we'll find out. Now, one thing I want to point out about this book is that on the edges there are pictures that we're going to want to be paying attention to as well. You see there's a picture here with a spinning wheel and a woman standing next to it. And over here, that same woman with a basket and some yarn. Once there was a boy named Nicky who wanted his new mittens made from wool as white as snow. So we are going to infer that Nicky is this person because his picture is there and it says his name in the text. And here we see a lot of snow. That's the color he wants his mitten to be. And over here, more snow. At first, his grandmother, Baba, remember babushka, Baba? Very common to use that. Did not want to knit white mittens. If you drop one in the snow, she warned, you'll never find it. But Nicky wanted snow white mittens, and finally Baba made them. So you see him there in his white yarn. See his grandmother knitting. And so we can infer that what she's knitting, based on the shape of it and what he wants, that they are the mittens. After she finished, she said, when you come home, first I will look to see if you are safe and sound, but then I will look to see if you still have your snow white mittens. So we can infer that she is concerned about him losing them. And we can also infer or make a prediction that something is going to happen with the mittens to give us the story here. So here we have the mittens again. This picture has a mole. So off Nicky went, and it wasn't long until one of his new mittens dropped in the snow and was left behind. Uh-oh. There he goes, running off. He's left his mitten behind. We see him running wherever he's going. And over here in this picture, we see a rabbit. We can infer something about the rabbit, but let's find out what's happening right now. A mole, tired from tunneling along, discovered the mitten and burrowed inside. It was cozy and warm, just the right size. So he decided to stay. And I know the picture's kind of small, but there's the mole going into the mitten. So the mitten was where the mole went. What's going to happen next? We have a rabbit coming into the picture. Can we infer something about the mole? The mole must be pretty small to fit inside of a mitten, right? Yeah. What's the rabbit going to do? Let's make a prediction. What's the rabbit going to do? Make predictions. Think, think, think. Okay, let's find out. Oh, that's a picture of Jan Brett, by the way. A snowshoe rabbit came hopping by. He stopped for a moment to admire his winter coat. So he's looking at himself. We can infer that. It was then he saw the mitten, and he wiggled in feet first. You think a rabbit would fit in a mitten? The mole didn't think there was room for both of them, but when he saw the rabbit's big kickers, he moved over. So what can we infer? It says that the mole saw the rabbit's big kickers, which we can infer means his feet. We can also infer that he moved over because he might have been a little bit nervous about that rabbit's feet kicking him. So over here we see the boy. He's out playing. and tucked in his belt is one of his mittens. Over here, this is a hedgehog walking along. Next, a hedgehog came snuffling along. Having spent the day looking under wet leaves for things to eat, he decided to move into the mitten and warm himself. Oh no! Can he fit? Well, we can infer that he can't, but it looks like he did. The mole and the rabbit were bumped and jostled, but not being ones to argue with someone covered with prickles, they made room. They didn't want to argue with someone covered with prickles, so we can infer that they were afraid they might get stuck by the prickles. Okay. So over here, we see the boy kind of looking in the hole in a tree, and if we look up here, you can see there's an owl. Over here, in the picture is the owl. As soon as the hedgehog disappeared into the mitten, a big owl, attracted by the commotion, swooped down. When he decided to move in also, the mole, the rabbit, and the hedgehog grumbled. That's what it would sound like. Is there room for the owl? Normally, we would infer that there wasn't. However, sometimes with fiction, we kind of suspend our prior knowledge. But when they saw the owl's glinty talons, they quickly let him in. What can you infer from that? I'll bet you know. Here's the little boy again, and we can see the mitten tucked in his belt. And we can infer that he isn't aware that the mitten has been lost, because he doesn't appear to be looking for a mitten. He just appears to be having fun. And over here, we can look in the other picture of the mitten. There's a little creature there called a badger. He's underneath or below the tree. Can we predict? We can make an inference and predict what's going to happen next. Up through the snow appeared a badger. He eyed the mitten and began to climb in. The mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, and the owl were not pleased. Do you see them there all squished in? A little cozy in there. There was no room left, but when they saw his diggers, they gave him the thumb. So we can infer the thumb means yes, the thumbs up. Here we still have the little boy, still out playing in the snow, climbing and enjoying things. And if you look carefully down in the that's a picture of the fox. So over here, we see the fox. Can we infer something? Can we make a prediction? Let's find out. I bet you knew. It started snowing, but the animals were snug in the mitten. A waft of warm steam rose in the air, and a fox, trotting by, stopped to investigate. Just the sight of the cozy mitten made him feel drowsy. The fox poked his muzzle in. When the mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, the owl, and the badger saw his shiny teeth, they gave the fox lots of room. We can infer again about how the animals were feeling about that. And I want you to notice the mitten. You see the hedgehog's prickles sticking out there. And here goes the fox into the mitten. Over here, we see the little boy enjoying sliding down the hill. See the smile on his face, but then he's having fun. And then there's a bear watching him. Over here, we see the bear walking along. Can we make an inference? Can we make a prediction? Can you use evidence from the pictures and text to prove that your prediction or your inference is correct? A great bear lumbered by. He spied the mitten all plumped up. Not being one to be left out in the cold, he began to nose his way in. The animals were packed in tightly as could be. But what animal would argue with a bear? The mitten swelled and stretched. It was pulled and bulged to many times its size. But Baba's good knitting held fast. Here's the little boy. Now he appears to be looking. And if you look really close, you're going to see Then we look over here. You see the mouse coming. Can you infer something? Can you make a prediction? Can you support your prediction? Let's find out. Along came a meadow mouse, no bigger than an acorn. She wriggled into the one space left and made herself comfortable on top of the bear's great nose. Now, we can make an inference about that. A mouse on top of a bear's nose, what might happen? Then we see the boy, he's looking down at his mitten, and then look over here. So we can infer, based on the expression on his face, that he's a little bit concerned. He's worried. Look at his mouth. He's like, that's the face of, oh no kind of face. And then we got to find out about this mouse and the bear, right? The bear, tickled by the mouse's whiskers, gave an enormous sneeze. So what do we say when we sneeze? We can infer without me even reading. We go, choo! So that's what it says. Ka-choo! The force of the sneeze shot the mitten up into the sky and scattered the animals in all directions. So did it say the mitten got ripped apart? It says it shot it up into the sky. So here's the little boy. Now it looks like he's looking, trying to find something. And there he's still looking, and he's clutching the one mitten that he has in his hand. Now remember, his Baba told him that when he came home, she was going to, you remember? First, check to see if he was safe and sound, and second, look for his mittens. So, we remember all of that as we look at this last couple pages. Can we infer that he would go home and tell his, or predict that he will tell his grandmother that he lost his mitten, or is he going to keep looking for it? Here's the picture. See all the animals, they all fell in the snow, because we can infer that as they exploded out, as the mitten popped, they all kind of spread around. Here's the other animals lying in the snow. Where did the mitten go? See it? On his way home, Nicky saw a white shape in the distance. It was the lost mitten silhouetted against the blue sky. So we can infer that he walked along after the mitten began to fall down. Right? As he ran to catch his snow-white mitten, he saw Baba's face in the window. There it is. First, she looked to see if he was safe and sound, and then she saw that he still had his new mittens. So, Baba's feeling pretty good about that. And you'll notice that all the animals are scattering. The badger went back into the tree, the rabbit went into the log, the mole is digging back into the ground. Here's the owl flying off, the fox running off to its den, the bear looking for a cave. Now, let's look at the last picture. We don't even need text. We can infer that this is the mitten that had all the animals in it. And we can infer that because all the animals were in it, they stretched it all out of shape. So, again, is the author and illustrator. The legend behind the story was children that always are trying to explain what happened to their clothing when they're out in the snow running around. So as a follow-up, I encourage you to do some questioning. So let's ask some questions of ourselves before we stop. Who are the characters? There were two main ones, Baba and Nicky. And then we have the animals, which you might count as characters. And if you want to try and remember all of them, I'm not going to. What's the setting? Well, the setting appears to be a little house, what we might call a cottage, and you'll notice that there's sort of logs put together to make a fence. There's thatched roofs. And if you look at the clothing, you would imagine that this is quite a while ago. And based on my prior knowledge, this is clothing that is very typical to the Scandinavian countries, Russia, that kind of thing. So I could infer that that's where it's taking place. What season is it? Well, rather obviously it's winter because there's snow. So we can tell when, we can tell where to some extent. We can also talk about the sequence of events was Baba made, and we're going to summarize it rather than retell everything. Baba made mittens. The little boy promised he would take care of him. He lost one. A bunch of animals climbed into the mitten until there were too many, and a mouse tickled the bear's nose. The mitten popped up in the air, and the little boy found it. And then he went home and showed his Baba that he hadn't lost his mittens. So that's our story, the mitten, making inferences and predictions, because we want to transition into making predictions based on prior knowledge, based on what's in the text and in the pictures, and then make predictions about what's coming next, or even as the story ends, what might happen. We can actually make a prediction about what's going to happen next here. My prediction is Baba's going to say, why is one mitten bigger than the other? Can you tell me? And then we can make a prediction about what the boy would say. But we'll leave that to everyone's imagination. All right, friends, I will see you again on Thursday. Bye.